AITA for refusing to babysit my half-siblings and telling my dad I'm not his backup mom. I'm 19 years old, a full-time college student, and I work part-time to cover my own expenses. My life is busy, and I barely have time for myself, let alone for anything outside of school and work. But for the past few years, my father has been trying to rope me into responsibilities that were never mine to begin with, and I finally snapped. Now, half my family is acting like I'm some heartless villain, and I genuinely don't know if I went too far. To really understand why I reacted the way I did, I need to go back to when everything fell apart. My parents had what I thought was a solid marriage until I was 12. That was the year my dad's affair came to light. He had been cheating on my mom with a much younger woman, Emily, who at the time was barely in her 20s. My mom was devastated. The divorce was ugly, drawn out, and painful. It wasn't just that he cheated, it was how little he seemed to care about the destruction he left in his wake. He moved on fast, and by moved on, I mean he married Emily almost immediately. It was like our family, my mom and I, were just pieces he could discard because he had a shiny new life waiting for him. I was still reeling from the divorce, still trying to process the fact that my dad had thrown away the family we had built, and then suddenly, Emily was in the picture like she had always belonged there. It was disorienting and infuriating. For a while, I tried to maintain a relationship with him. I thought, maybe, just maybe, he felt guilty for what he did. Maybe he wanted to make things right with me. But as time went on, I realized that wasn't the case at all. He wasn't interested in repairing the damage, he was interested in convincing me that everything was fine, that his new life was normal, that I should just accept it without question. He would invite me over, expect me to play the part of the happy daughter who adored her new stepmother, and I just couldn't do it. I resented Emily, whether that was fair or not, and I resented my father for putting me in a situation where I felt like I had to pretend none of it hurt. Then, the kids came. 1, then 2, then 3, all born in rapid succession. And suddenly, my dad started acting like I was supposed to play big sister of the year. He constantly pushed the idea that I needed to bond with my half-siblings, that family takes care of family, that it was important for me to be present in their lives. Except, I never signed up for any of this. I didn't want siblings. I didn't want to be part of the new perfect family he had built on the ashes of the old one. The worst part. Every time he called me, it wasn't to check in on me. It was to ask me for something. Babysitting. Help around the house. Giving Emily a break. It was always a favor, never just a father-daughter conversation. And every time I said no, he found a way to guilt-trip me. Emily is so overwhelmed, he would say. The kids would love to spend time with you. I thought family meant something to you. Every single call, the same routine. I kept declining. I kept telling him I was busy. And I wasn't lying, I really was. College is hard. Working part-time while juggling assignments and exams is exhausting. The little free time I have, that belongs to me. But he never saw it that way. In his mind, I was just being difficult. Selfish. Then last weekend, he called me again. His tone was different this time, more desperate. Emily, he said, was having a mental breakdown and needed time to herself. He needed me to come over, to take care of the kids for a few hours, just this once. And something in me just snapped. I had heard this song and danced too many times before, and I was done playing along. I told him, I'm not your backup mom. You chose to have more kids, and that's not my responsibility. Silence. Then, he let out this disappointed sigh and said, I thought you were more mature than this. And he hung up on me. I sat there, staring at my phone, seething. He really had the audacity to act like I was the unreasonable one, like I was some selfish child throwing a tantrum instead of a college student who was sick of being treated like free labor. But before I could even process my anger, the messages started rolling in. Emily sent me a long, tear-filled message about how exhausted she was, how she was drowning, how she couldn't believe I could be so heartless when I knew she was struggling. Then came my dad's texts, telling me I was abandoning my family, that I was selfish, that I needed to grow up and take responsibility. And then, somehow, my grandmother got involved. She called me and gave me a whole speech about how I needed to help my father in his time of need, because family takes care of family. And that's the part that gets me. Everyone keeps throwing that phrase around, family takes care of family. But where was that energy when my dad was cheating on my mom? Where was that family loyalty when he left us in the dust to chase after a younger woman? Where was my dad when I was struggling through the aftermath of his betrayal? He made his choices. He built a new family. And now that he's realizing how hard it is, he suddenly expects me to step in and pick up the slack. The only person who has been on my side through all of this is my mom. She told me I did the right thing, that it's not my job to fix my dad's mess, and that I have every right to put myself first. But now, half my family is furious with me, and I'm starting to wonder if I really did go too far. Was I wrong for refusing to help? Was I too harsh? Should I have just sucked it up and gone over there, even if it meant sacrificing my own time and energy? Or was I right to finally put my foot down? Update 1. A few days after I refused to help, my dad found a new way to try and break me. The guilt trips hadn't worked, the emotional manipulation hadn't worked, and my firm rejection had only pushed him to get more creative. He needed a new way to dig under my skin, a way to make me feel like the cruel, heartless one in all of this. So he decided to take a different approach, one that involved the kids. It started with a simple message. Ben and Lila have been asking all day when you're coming, he wrote. They miss their big sister so much. I stared at my phone, gripping it so tightly that my fingers ached. It was such a short, seemingly innocent message, but I knew exactly what it was. This wasn't him reaching out because he suddenly cared about my relationship with them. He wasn't sending this because he wanted me to feel connected or included. No, this was a carefully calculated move. He was weaponizing their innocence, using their little voices, their trust, their complete lack of understanding, as a way to break down my defenses. I didn't respond. I wasn't going to play this game. But then the audio messages started rolling in. Tiny, high-pitched voices, full of unfiltered, eager excitement, filled my speakers. Please, we want to play with you. They were so young, their words slightly jumbled together, the kind of enthusiastic pleading that only little kids could manage. If I didn't know better, if I were some outsider looking in, I might have thought it was sweet. I might have thought, wow, they really miss her. But I did know better. I knew kids that young didn't just wake up one morning and suddenly become desperate for an older sister they barely knew. They weren't sitting around, pining for me, wondering when I was going to finally show up and play house with them. No, this wasn't their idea. This was him. My father, the same man who had abandoned me emotionally for years, who had only ever reached out when he needed something, who had never made a real effort to mend our broken relationship, he was now using his own children to try and manipulate me. I could practically picture it. Him standing over them, feeding them lines, telling them, say you miss her. Say you want her to come play. Make it sound excited. The sheer audacity of it made my stomach turn. I knew exactly what he wanted. He wanted me to feel guilty. He wanted me to sit there, listening to those innocent little voices, and feel like a monster for ignoring them. He wanted me to believe that I was the one hurting them, that I was depriving them of a sibling, that I was the problem here. But instead of guilt, all I felt was rage. Blistering, white-hot rage. It wasn't love. It wasn't care. It wasn't about family. This was a game, a manipulation tactic, and I wasn't falling for it. I refused to respond. I left his messages on read, ignored the audio clips, and shoved my phone deep into my bag as if that would somehow bury the anger along with it. I went about my life as if nothing had happened, but the fury simmered under my skin, an open wound that refused to heal. And then, he took it a step further. I was at work, exhausted from a long day of juggling customers and assignments, when my boss pulled me aside. It wasn't in a disciplinary way, there was no anger, no frustration in his voice. But there was something worse. Concern. A tone that immediately sent alarm bells ringing in my head. I got a strange call earlier, he said carefully, his expression unreadable. Your father reached out. Said you were struggling with time management. That you work too much and need more days off to spend time with your family. For a moment, the words didn't even register. My mind blanked, unable to process what I had just heard. My father, my actual father, had called my job. Had spoken to my boss. had gone behind my back to try and interfere with my work life. My stomach dropped so fast I felt dizzy. My skin burned with a mixture of embarrassment and rage so intense that I could barely breathe. He had the nerve to do this. He had the nerve to interfere in my professional life, to contact my boss, to paint this ridiculous picture of me as some struggling, overwhelmed girl who needed a break. And for what? Just so he could get his way. Just so I would be forced to step into the role he had been trying to shove me into for years. I could feel my boss watching me closely, gauging my reaction. My mind spun, running through all the terrible possibilities. What if I had a different boss, one who actually believed him? What if my hours had been cut, my reliability questioned, all because my father decided to play the role of the concerned parent when it suited him? The thought made my blood boil. I left work that day shaking with fury. My hands trembled as I yanked my phone out of my pocket and called him. He answered almost immediately, as if he had been expecting this. And that alone sent me over the edge. He knew what he had done. He had done it on purpose. He had sat there, made that phone call, said those words, knowing full well that it would get back to me. Knowing that I would be furious. I didn't even give him a chance to speak. The moment I heard his voice, I let loose. I told him, in no uncertain terms, that he had crossed a line. That my job was none of his business. That he had no right to interfere in my life like this. That I was done with his manipulations, his tactics, his constant attempts to control me. I was loud. I was furious. I didn't care. I wanted him to know, wanted it to sink into his thick skull, that this wasn't just an overstep. This was a violation. And the worst part? He wasn't even surprised. He didn't argue. He didn't deny it. He didn't try to justify his actions. He just sighed, like I was a child throwing a tantrum, like I was the one being difficult, like I was the one who didn't understand. And then, in that same infuriating, condescending tone, he said it. I just want you to understand that family is more important than anything else. Update 2. A week later, something happened that I couldn't even wrap my head around. I thought I had seen the worst of my father's manipulation, that he had already exhausted every trick in his book to force me into playing big sister to the kids I never asked for. I thought the guilt trips, the fake concern, the interference at my job, that was as low as he could go. But I was wrong. I was so incredibly wrong. It had been a long day. College was draining, work was exhausting, and all I wanted was to go home, collapse onto my bed, and enjoy a few hours of peace before doing it all over again the next day. But the moment I walked through the door, I realized something was very, very wrong. The sound hit me first, high-pitched giggles, the unmistakable noise of children playing, running around, making themselves comfortable in a place they had no business being. My stomach dropped. And then I saw them. 3 little kids in my living room, playing like they belonged there. Like this was just a normal day. And standing next to them, her arms crossed so tightly it looked like she was holding herself back from committing murder, was my mom. She looked furious. No, furious wasn't even the right word, she looked like she was about to explode. Her entire body was tense, her jaw clenched, her fingers curled into fists. I had never seen her this angry before, and considering everything my dad had put her through, that was saying a lot. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but no words came out. She didn't even wait for me to process what was happening. She pointed toward the front door, where, on the floor, there was a folded note with my dad's handwriting. My heart pounded as I bent down to pick it up, and the moment I read the words, I felt sick. They're tired of waiting for you to make time for them. I hope this helps you get closer. That was it. No warning. No request. No, hey, would you be okay watching them for a little while? Just a decision. Just my father, once again, deciding that my life wasn't my own. That he could dump his responsibilities on me whenever he wanted. That I didn't have a choice in this. I felt my whole body go cold. This wasn't just crossing a line. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. This was something else entirely. This was him throwing his own children at my doorstep like an uninvited package, walking away, and expecting me to deal with it. I looked back at my mom, and the way she was gripping her phone told me exactly what had happened before I even asked. She had called him. She had let him have it. And judging by the way her face was still red with anger, I could only imagine the words that had been exchanged. And then, just when I thought this couldn't get any worse, my father actually showed up. But he didn't come alone. Emily was with him. And she looked awful. Her face was pale, her eyes red and puffy, her whole body slumped in a way that screamed exhaustion. She barely looked at me before turning to my mom, her hands shaking as she clutched the front of her sweater. And then, she started begging. She begged my mother to understand, to have some sympathy, to realize how hard it was for her, to see that she had no support, that she couldn't handle everything on her own. She pleaded with both of us to step in, just a little, just sometimes, just to give her a break before she completely fell apart. My mother just laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh, or even an amused one. It was cold, sharp, cutting. The kind of laugh that held years of resentment, years of anger, years of pain that had never been acknowledged, never been apologized for, never been fixed. "How can this be my daughter's problem?" she asked, her voice dripping with nothing but disdain. And she was right. It wasn't my problem. It had never been my problem. My father had made his choices. He had destroyed our family, built a new one, had more children, and now, when it got too hard, when the weight of his decisions became too much to bear, he had the audacity to try and push it onto me. To push it onto my mother, the woman he had betrayed and discarded like she was nothing. My mom didn't hesitate. She didn't waver. She picked up the kids, one by one, and handed them back to their father. Then she looked him straight in the eye and said the words that should have been obvious from the start. "You destroyed your family yourself. Now you have to sort it out yourself." Update 3. After that scene at my house, after my mother handed the kids back to my father and left him standing there with no sympathy, no support, and no way out, I thought he might finally get the message. That he might finally understand that he couldn't manipulate his way into forcing me to be part of his new family. But I had underestimated his desperation. The messages kept coming. The calls, the voicemails, the endless attempts to break through the wall I had put up. At first, they were the usual guilt trips, the ones I had seen 1,000 times before. He begged me to reconsider, told me that family was the most important thing in the world, reminded me that my siblings looked up to me and needed me in their lives. Then he tried another angle, acting as if he was concerned for me, as if he was worried about my coldness, about my supposed inability to forgive. He asked me if this bitterness was really how I wanted to live my life, if shutting out family was something I would regret one day. I ignored all of it. Every call, every voicemail, every manipulative text. I refused to play along. I had spent too many years being pulled into his drama, into his twisted game where I was always the one expected to bend, to forgive, to accommodate. I was done. And when the realization set in that I wasn't taking the bait, he did what he always did, he tried to get others to do his dirty work for him. Suddenly, my grandmother was calling me. The same woman who had scolded me for abandoning my father in his time of need, who had lectured me on the importance of helping family, was now leaving long, rambling voicemails about how life is too short for grudges, and how, one day I would regret pushing my father away. She talked about how he was struggling, about how Emily was struggling, about how I had a duty to support them because that's what families do. I deleted every message without listening to the end. Then came my father's last attempt. The final, dramatic blow meant to cut me to my core, to finally shatter my resolve. A simple text. "If you don't want to be part of my family, then I guess we don't have anything else to talk about." I read it once. Then again. I waited for something to hit me. Some kind of anger, some kind of sadness, some kind of pain. But there was nothing. Just silence in my head. Just emptiness where all the years of hurt and resentment used to sit. If he had sent something like this a few years ago, it would have destroyed me. I would have cried all night, stared at my phone until my eyes hurt, questioned if I had been too harsh, if I had done something wrong. I would have second-guessed every decision that had led to this moment. But now, it didn't hurt at all. I didn't feel like I had lost anything. If anything, I felt like I had been set free. Because this was never about me rejecting my family. This was never about me being heartless or cruel or unwilling to forgive. This was about him making choices, choices that hurt people, choices that he never once took responsibility for. He had destroyed his family 7 years ago when he cheated, when he threw my mother away like she was disposable, when he built a new life and expected me to act like none of it mattered. He had made his choice back then. Now, I had made mine. But that wasn't the end of it. A few days later, I got a message from one of my aunts. She was the only one who had supported my father through all of this, the only one who had tried to defend him, the only one who had ever made excuses for him. Which is why I was so surprised when I saw her name pop up on my phone. Her message was short but packed with information that made me sit back in disbelief. She told me that ever since that night at my house, things between my dad and Emily had been falling apart. Emily was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. She was done. She had reached her breaking point. She was exhausted, mentally and physically drained, and she had made it clear that she couldn't keep carrying this burden alone. She was threatening to leave him. She had spent the last few years raising 3 kids practically by herself while my father did what he always did, avoided responsibility, pushed the hard parts onto someone else, and then acted like the victim when things didn't go his way. And now, Emily was done pretending. She was done picking up his slack. She was done fighting a battle he had never really been in to begin with. She had told him, in no uncertain terms, that if he didn't step up and actually take responsibility for his own family, she was leaving. And, of course, my father did what he always did when faced with a problem: he looked for someone else to blame. First, he turned to his mother. The same grandmother who had been so quick to tell me that family should help each other was now being called upon to do exactly that. And her response? A firm, unwavering no. She told him that she had already raised her children and wasn't about to start raising his. She told him that she had her own life, that she had done her part, and that it was his responsibility, not hers, to take care of the mess he had created. Then he tried his sisters. One by one, he reached out to them, trying to guilt them into helping, trying to push his burden onto them the same way he had tried to push it onto me. But they refused to. They had their own families, their own jobs, their own responsibilities. They weren't about to drop everything to clean up his mess. And that's when the reality finally started to sink in for him. The truth that he had spent so many years avoiding. There was no one left to carry his burden. No one left to fix things for him. No one left to absorb the consequences of his actions. He had spent so long making excuses, so long blaming everyone but himself, that he had never once considered what would happen when people stopped picking up after him. And now, here he was, alone, with 3 small children who needed him, a wife who was ready to walk out the door, and no one left to help him pretend that this wasn't his fault. This was supposed to be his final blow to me, his last attempt at making me feel guilty enough to give in. But this time, it didn't work. It didn't even touch me. I no longer felt anger. I no longer felt pain. Only relief. He had made his choice 7 years ago. Now I had made mine. And, honestly, I don't regret it for a second.